Animals are independent creatures, but sometimes they really need our help because their lives may depend on us. People help trapped bears, as well as dangerous and huge creatures that are washed ashore. They pull animals out of deep crevices and rescue them from ice captivity. It's worth seeing. In this episode, I'll show you animals that asked people for help. Let's go. Let's start the episode with the clumsy bear. Somehow it got its head stuck in a can. Probably it wanted to drink from it or something. In any case, there was no way the bear could remove the can on its own, so it came out on the side of the road to people. The indifferent drivers made a concerted effort to help the bear get rid of the trap, but as soon as it was over, the drivers ran back to their cars. They did all right. Who knows, maybe the bear would hug them to death trying to thank them. But there was no need for this, and everyone was satisfied. And here is another victim of thirst. Only this time there were no cans on the head. This king cobra was literally dying of thirst. It had not been drinking for so long that it decided to take an unusual step. It decided to crawl up to people and ask them for help. The locals were scared at first, but then decided to help the reptile, realizing that the animal was not going to cause harm. One man took the cobra by the tail, and the other carefully gave it water from a bottle. After that, the cobra was taken to a special animal care facility, where it ended up in good hands. Sometimes you have to help snakes, and sometimes you have to help creatures which suffer from snakes themselves. In this case, that creature was a little deer. The fawn was wandering along the road in Thailand and came across a hungry boa constrictor, which immediately attacked it and began to wrap its deadly rings around it. Luckily for the fawn, a tourist was nearby. He got out of the car and frightened the snake with a long branch. It soon loosened its grip and left the fawn alone. Of course, it's a kind of interference in the wildlife, but was it possible to leave the fawn in trouble? The next animal of the episode is also a baby. It's time for a baby fox. The adult fox ran to the people and led them to a hole. When the people came to it, it was clear. A baby fox had fallen into it. It had fallen right into a drainage pipe and was stuck tightly. So much so that the rescue operation dragged on for hours. Finally, one of the rescuers managed to get the animal out of the bottom by grabbing its tail. For the first few seconds, the pup looked very frightened. The rescuers washed and dried the animal and let it go. In this footage, we have a predatory creature again, but it's much more dangerous than a baby fox. This is a real adult polar bear with a tin can in its mouth. In fact, that's the problem the bear came to humans with. The animal couldn't get rid of it on its own. From the outside, it might seem that there's nothing very serious and that the tin can can be removed in no time, but it's not so. It turned out that the bear had been carrying the can in its mouth for days and couldn't eat or drink. People had to perform the entire operation, literally. The veterinarians flew out to the scene and tranquilized and immobilized the bear. It was the only way they were able to remove the tin can and save the animal. The bear's tongue was cut badly, but the vet said such wounds heal quickly. In this footage, we see the thrill seekers near a rapid mountain river. From the first seconds of the video, it looks like the man who got into the water decided to demonstrate some cool stunt for the video. But in fact, he rushed to save a little moose. The current was rapidly carrying it away. The man was in time. He got in the way of the animal, caught it, and carried it to the shore. A little later, and the calf would have been carried away much further. Most likely, it would not have survived. Not only people suffer from cataclysms, but also animals. Here we see just such a victim of a cataclysm. A dog was covered with rocks and sand after a powerful landslide. It was buried up to its neck, so it couldn't get out by itself. Fortunately, the hero of this story, Soner, dug the dog up with his bare hands and a shovel and pulled it to a safe place. But that wasn't the end of the story. The stray dog continued to howl even after it was rescued. Soner and his colleague, who was behind the camera, thought it was for a reason. Soner returned to the burrow and continued digging. After a few minutes of diligent digging, the man stumbled upon a tiny body which fur was covered with dirt. It was that dog's puppy. But it wasn't alone either. Soner continued digging until he rescued all the stray dog's puppies. In a total of 2 hours of digging, the man rescued 8 puppies. This is worthy of respect. Here comes another excavation. This time there was no landslide. The animal fell into a narrow crevice. And now a man fumbles for the animal, starts pulling it by its paws, and a muzzle shows up on the surface. Does everyone recognize what it is? Yes, it's a kangaroo. Apparently, the Australian jumper miscalculated its trajectory and accidentally fell into the crevice. Anyway, it's saved now. The marsupial looked gratefully at its rescuer and then jumped away on its business. We have a similar situation here. Again, we see a deep crevice, and again we see an animal that got stuck in it. This time, a lamb fell victim to its own inattentiveness. A caring teenager volunteered to save it. The boy did everything correctly. He tied the leg of the lamb with a belt and pulled the animal out fairly quickly. In general, everything was almost like in the story with the kangaroo. Only the lamb was not so clever. After a couple of seconds, it jumped and got into the crevice again. Either it can't learn from its mistakes or it just didn't want to get out of the crevice. Anyway, it was fun. Not only land creatures need help, but also water creatures, even the most dangerous ones. In 2017, Ben Johnson, a dive instructor, was diving off the Cayman Islands and came across a shark. At first, Ben was frightened, but he soon noticed a large knife sticking out of the shark's head. It was as if the shark had asked the diver for help. It whirled around, swam closer to him, and turned around, showing him the knife. Ben couldn't leave the animal. He had to help the shark. Ben carefully took the knife out of the animal's head, and then it swam away. According to Ben himself, he saw the same shark again a few days later, and the wound had healed completely by then. Now let's go to the beach, along which a man in an orange t-shirt is running. He's not taking a morning jog or something. He's running to save an animal that's in trouble. This animal is another shark. Mind you, it's big enough. The poor guy washed ashore and the man pulls it even further, but only to get the hook out of the predator's body. Now the shark is saved and free. All that remains is to bring it back into the water, which is what the hero in the orange t-shirt does. Do you know what a mouflon is? If you don't, this is a wild sheep that have very beautiful twisted horns. But beauty is not always good. For example, this mouflon got its horns caught in a tree in the woods. Because of the shape of the horns, there was no way it could free itself from this captivity. It's like handcuffing yourself to a radiator. But luckily for the herbivore, the man was running nearby that day. At first, the runner tried to bend or break the tree to free the animal, but that was unsuccessful. Then he simply began pulling the mouflon by its horns, gradually pulling it away from the tree. After about a minute, the mouflon was rescued. It's no secret that whales are often washed ashore. As a rule, they die after that because they can't return to the water on their own. Sometimes people with special equipment help them, but this time no equipment was needed. Dozens of people organized a rescue operation and brought back the whale to the ocean after it had been thrown into the shallow water. I suggest you just take a little look at this cool footage. Okay, whales being washed ashore are nothing new, but what about stingrays? Yeah, it turns out that these flat fish sometimes end up on shore too and have to be rescued. In this footage, we see such a rescue. Because of the shape of its body, the stingray couldn't return to the water on its own, so vacationers came to its rescue. It's hard to believe from the outside, but stingrays can weigh hundreds of kilograms, and some species, for example, manta rays, even weigh several tons. So it's extremely difficult to drag such a carcass back into the water. It took a few minutes for the men to return the stingray back to the water. It soon broke away from the sand and swam away after a couple of minutes. By the first few seconds of the video, it may seem like we're watching some kind of ice swimming competition. But in fact, we're looking at a hero who rushed into an icy river in which a dog turned out to be. Its faithful congener was standing nearby, but of course there was nothing it could do to help. Unlike the brave man, who got close to the dog by breaking the thin ice. The rescue operation was successful. They swam back together and were soon ashore. How nice that the world still has such caring and courageous heroes. Everyone knows that cats are mischievous animals that can climb anywhere. This furball somehow managed to climb to the top of the telephone pole. However, it didn't think about how it was going to get back down. Besides, it's almost physically impossible to do it. The cat's claws are grown in such a way that they only hold the animal tightly when it climbs up. Anyway, the cat meowed pitifully and called for help, and soon a rescuer with a belay came up to it. It carefully removed the cat from the top and secured it to the pole so that the cat could descend on its own. By propping and leading the cat, the man eventually got the animal to the bottom and rescued it. That's all, guys. Have you ever rescued animals? Share your stories in the comments. Thanks for watching, and see you later.